Hello and welcome back, everybody. Another edition here of Thursdays with Phillip on the Auburn Undercover podcast. My name is Nathan King. As always, Phillip Marshall is here. It is the post-bye week now for Auburn. They get set with a 2-4 record to begin the second half of the season. They will go to Columbia, Missouri for the first time since 2017 to take on number 19 Mizzou on Saturday. And what is an interesting game. The lines come down a little bit. I think this game's going to be close. Still a lot to find out about Missouri. They've been pretty rocky here to start the season, so it should be a good one for Auburn on the road on Saturday. But Phillip, we didn't do a show last week during the bye week. Obviously, Auburn went to Georgia, and that game went. Auburn played okay, but the final score was about what we expected from that one. So Auburn sits now at the bye week. Phillip, heading into the second half of the year, needing quite the turnaround from a record perspective to be able to make it to a bowl game at the end of the year.
Well, they got to flip it, basically. They went 2-4 the first half. They got to go forward to at least the second half. And can they do it? That's the question. There are reasons for optimism, I believe. I mean, young players are getting better. I think that I haven't seen any sign of a team that's coming apart or anything like that. So they don't have a game left that's impossible to win. The problem is that they also don't have a game left unless it's Louisiana Monroe, and we'll see about that. But that's impossible to lose. And what usually happens when you play a bunch of those kind of games is you win about half of them and lose about half of them. Now, they played a bunch of those kind of games the first half of the season, and they lost too many of them. And but I think the reason for hope is they didn't lose them because they didn't have enough players to win them. They lost them for the most part, with the exception of Georgia. Because they made mistakes that cost them the game. You have to, obviously, that can't be repeated, or they'll obviously lose more games. But if they don't, and one thing, they've had one turnover the last two games, right?
Yep.
So that's a definite improvement. And so, Missouri is not a great team, I don't think. I mean, they're 5-1, but 3 of them are guarantee games, and they beat Vanderbilt in overtime, and then just got absolutely torched by Texas A&M. And so we'll see. That doesn't make. I'm sure they're going to play better at home than they did at Texas A&M. I don't have any doubt about that, and I'll be surprised if it's not a close game. But as far as winning 4 games, if you look at it, and I still think that I would still expect them to beat Vanderbilt at home. Some people have said, well, Jerry Kill has done this and done that, and the offensive coordinator, I forget his name, that was at New Mexico State last year. But the thing about that is, Hugh Freeze doesn't coach defense, which is where the problem has come. And I think one of the really overlooked positives about this Auburn team is even, if I read it correctly, they're playing more snaps on defense than any team in the conference.
Yep.
And
in the country, I think. In
the country. And they've only given up as many as 400 yards one time. That's pretty impressive, really. And so we'll see how DJ Durkin's defense fares the rest of the season. But I do think Auburn will beat Vanderbilt, and I believe they'll beat Louisiana Monroe. But that leaves Missouri and Kentucky on the road, and Texas A&M at home, and Alabama Louisiana Monroe at home and Alabama on the road. And I think Auburn, to say you got a great chance to go to Tuscaloosa and win would probably be a mistake. But I don't believe this Alabama team is on the same level as recent Alabama team, particularly defensive. And so we'll see what happens. But if they win those two games that I think they should win, then they got to figure out a way to win two other ones. And that would be Kentucky, Missouri, Kentucky, Texas A&M, and Alabama. And if they were playing Missouri and Kentucky at home, I would think they had a great chance to get the 6. But playing them on the road is going to be tough. It's probably a good thing for them that Kentucky's playing Florida this week. But that's obviously that's what they've got to do. And I think, as we communicated earlier, the question is, what if they do and what if they don't? And if they do, then I think that'll be a real boost. I mean, it's hard to say winning 6 games would be a boost, but sometimes it depends on where you came from. And I wrote a column on Wednesday morning about I can't find any Auburn team looking back really through the 1970s that started 2-4 or worse and had a winning record in the end. But I do think this situation is somewhat different because of how most of those losses have happened. And those are things that can be avoided and are going to have to be avoided. If they don't do it, what does it mean? Well, here's what, despite the painful, agonizing screams of Auburn fans, what it doesn't mean is that Hugh Freeze is in any trouble at all. He is not, will not be. And I talked to I'm not going to name him, but a very influential Auburn booster last week. And my question was, well, it's been a rough season. And I guess that's a question. I said, it's been a rough season. And he said, I'm really not surprised considering the situation we had when Hugh arrived. And then he went on to highly sing the praises of Hugh Freeze. So, and I think it's pretty clear from what recruits have said that they're not going to be, you never know if you might lose somebody, but I certainly don't think doesn't sound like there's going to be any kind of mass exodus from this recruiting class. And really, when it comes to building a program, this season's freshmen and next season's freshmen, assuming that they get all or most of the ones that are committed, that's really going to be the foundation of Hugh's program, regardless of what happens the rest of this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think more so than wins and losses now, and I mean, and wins and losses, that's the number one thing. You gotta have them, and so obviously they're going to try to improve. But right now, looking in the second half of the year, I mean, Freeze said it this week. It's about making good on the things they think they can make good on, and that's reflective of coaching. And I think that Hugh Freeze is motivated to do that in the second half of the year because they feel like game plans have been sound. They feel like blueprints going all the way back to the summer. Hey, we're going to do this on offense. We're going to put these guys in these positions. They feel like those things. And if you look at, if you were to do a blind resume test and not include the record of a team, Auburn's not been great, but you'd think they're okay. You probably wouldn't think they were 2-4. And so one thing
they were at least 4-2.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so. Now, if you included the turnover statistic, people would definitely.
But yeah, that's really when you get right down to it, that's been the issue more than anything else. I mean, there's been other things that have happened, obviously.
Yeah.
But when you look at an entire game against two relatively evenly matched teams, more offensive plays are unsuccessful than successful, and you never know, sitting in the stands or sitting in the press box or whatever, you don't know why those plays that were unsuccessful. There are mistakes made that are not readily noticeable. I mean, if a offensive lineman blocks the wrong guy, you and I not going to know we blocked the wrong guy. And so there's always going to be mistakes in college football. I mean, again, I wrote about that 2 days ago. That consistency. I've talked to the gamblers, of which I'm not one on football, and they say that's why you like to bet on the NFL more than college, because they're consistent for the most part. Nobody's 100% consistent, but they're much more consistent. And establishing that consistency is going to be a key to this season and to every season.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Luke Deal put it a really good way leading into the Georgia game. He talked about executing situational football better, and I think that's what's and Charles Kelly talked about it on Tiger Talk last week. You know, he said he obviously invoked the Pat Dye quote about there's gonna be a few plays a game, and obviously he knows better than anybody, but he said most of the time those plays fall in the red zone. They fall on third down. They fall late in the fourth quarter. And so Auburn for 70% of games so far this year has been okay. But whether it's a 4th and inches against Oklahoma, that, wonky Wildcat play call that didn't work out, whether it's the fourth quarter pick 6 that breaks your back and loses you the game, whether it's 4th and 1, you're only trailing 11 against Georgia in the fourth quarter, and it's a broken play, bad communication, and it just goes sideways. Little things like that have come back to bite this team. And I think, Phillip, I think the odds are with them that they're going to turn this around at some point and be able to beat somebody because they'll play a complete game. Is it going to be this Saturday? I don't know, but I just feel like that might be coming for them.
Or at least more complete, yeah. It's I guess the biggest thing to me when I look at it is that, and I think this is pretty much what Hugh has said, is they've executed well a lot offensively, but they haven't executed well when it mattered the most. And that's really, in the SEC, that's what you have to do, because most games are going to be close. And but I mean, you look at Cal, you look at Arkansas, you look at Oklahoma. I mean, there's in every one of those games, there's a play where you could say, well, if this had happened instead of this, they would have won the game. And Arkansas won by 10, but the last field goal came after Auburn went for it deep in their own territory. And so, yeah, I mean, those are not things that can't be fixed. I heard Brent Venables the other day talking about the Texas game, and he said, what's most frustrating is the penalties. I guess they had a lot of penalties. He said, it's the penalties that take no talent at all. So it doesn't take any talent not to get a false start, or it doesn't take any talent not to hit somebody late or whatever. And that's true. So they've just got to if they're going to be successful, they got to start executing in those situations, because the best teams do that. The best teams execute better with a game on the line than otherwise a lot of times.
Well, and to what you're talking about, Phillip, having that conversation about freeze and moving forward and kind of the outlook of the program. I was talking to somebody this week, and I think there's maybe a little bit of a misconception about that conversation. I think some people think that Auburn fans have become sort of complacent with a record or a product on the field. At least in my talk, when talking to people, that outlook of they think Freeze is doing a good job, they think it is going to work out in the end, has nothing to do with, well, they're playing pretty well on the field. I don't think people are accepting a 2-4 record. It's more so looking ahead now and seeing
Right.
mainly the recruiting classes. I don't
And
think
it's also it's understanding. And look, people wait all year for college football season, and then when it doesn't go well, now to feel better, if you have a bad year, to feel better is months and months and months away, even the chance of feeling better. So it's hard, and people spend a lot of money to go to college football games, and I recognize that. But you cannot unrecognize that he really has I think he has 16 players on the roster that he inherited, I believe is the number.
That's it.
And and Jarquez is the only player remaining out of his recruiting class. And and the next recruiting class wasn't a whole lot better. And so that's where he is. And you mentioned Pat Dye earlier. Auburn, Pat Dye's first season, Auburn went 5-6 and literally lost 3 games they never should have lost. Never should have lost. But he told me several years later that if we had won those games, it might not have been good because we might have gotten a false sense of where we were. And Auburn this year has not won those games. But, and I know Pat Dye won 9 games his second season. But the only coach who inherited a situation remotely like, in my time, remotely like what Hugh inherited was Doug Barfield in 1976, where they just didn't have many players. And, every new coaching job is different. I mean, most of the defense on Auburn's 1983 team were players that Coach Dye inherited that had already been there. Lionel James also had already been there. Randy Campbell was already there. Ed West, who played for years and years in the NFL, was already there. He inherited a lot more. I mean, they had huge holes, don't get me wrong, but he inherited a lot more than Hugh did under all the circumstances. So I think that, everybody wants to win. But that gets back to the same question that we've talked about before. Do you want to build a team or do you want to build a program? And I think Hugh came here and with the full blessing of the administration that he wants to build a program. And I think that starts obviously with upgrading the talent level through recruiting. And, it's the whole portal thing is risky. I mean, you might have if he had just gone wholesale to the portal and not tried to sign all these high school players, they might be better right now at the moment than they are. But I mean, all you got to do is look at Florida State. They went 13-0 last year with a team of mostly transfers. And now they got a team of mostly transfers that can't win a game. Same thing happened with Michigan State, Peyton Thorne's junior year. They were mostly a transfer team, or sophomore year, I guess. I get confused with the COVID year and all that. But after that, since then, they haven't been any good. So, well, I'm sure and it's going to be interesting to watch what happens to Ole Miss too in the years ahead. Even though I still think they're probably going to lose 3 or 4 games this year. And so anyway, that's my wisdom, such as it is.
Well, I think too, and I mentioned already that, I think it's less about the people are not giving Freeze a pass for what's going on right now in terms of a record. I think it's just more so looking forward. Already mentioning that, I think that mindset will change next year.
No question. I don't think that anybody in a position of authority, power, whatever you want to call it, specifically John Cohen and Chris Roberts, I think they're going to expect to see improvement next year, and there should be improvement next year. Now, you're going to have a question at quarterback, obviously, but they've got, what you would think are their quarterbacks, plural, of the future, Walker White and Deuce Knight. So, could either one of them be ready to play and win next year? It's possible. But I know you and others are convinced they're going to sign a portal quarterback, and I'm not saying they're not, but I would think if they do, it'll be a one and done guy. But here's the thing: you don't know. Last year there happened to be a handful of them that were really attractive. That doesn't mean there will be this year. You just don't know yet.
Yeah, and I wrote after Deuce committed, but I think that decision honestly makes your transfer work in the offseason at quarterback maybe makes it a little easier because you're not feeling as much of a, oof, yeah, this guy's got to be awesome or else we don't have anybody. If your transfer guy doesn't work out, you've got two, top 50 prospects waiting in the wings, continuing to develop. One of them is probably bound to be ready to play pretty soon. And so I think that kind of takes some pressure off that. Yeah. And that's the point. That's why you recruit good quarterbacks.
Exactly. And they'll try to recruit another one next year, I'm sure. Yep.
And he'll go after a transfer that he thinks could be the starter. There's no point in not trying to upgrade. Right. I think definitely after last offseason too.
Like players have told me for years that the first thing you have to understand is the day you sign, they're trying to sign somebody better than you to take your spot. And that's true. But now the difference is, for instance, let's just say that they sign a transfer quarterback and he's the quarterback next year, and then Deuce and Walker battle it out in the spring and in the fall. Well, whoever finishes second stay. You'd have to say there's at least a pretty good chance that they won't.
Yeah, it's tough. This is the Malik Willis situation from a few years ago. It's not apples to apples, and he wasn't a very good Auburn player, and he admitted that he wasn't very good. But you just never know. Speaking of quarterback, Phillip, something we wanted to kind of touch on tonight. Peyton Thorne is the guy. It's funny. I did a podcast today where a Missouri radio, it was a good podcast. Missouri radio person asked me about, what the offense is going to look like now that they've moved on from Peyton Thorne. They have not moved on from Peyton Thorne. He is going to be the guy, obviously. And Phillip, I guess just talk about, we've had this conversation a million times since Peyton Thorne's been here. He's been through the ringer as Auburn's quarterback. He's had to be the guy at the center of a rocky couple seasons. And we saw it continue. Freeze was even asked on Monday about that 4th-and-1 play against Georgia. That has gone on and on. And, Thorne continues to shoulder a lot of criticism this season.
Well, he does. And that's quarterbacks in general take a lot of criticism. I don't, and I've said this, and I posted on message boards and everything else. I don't understand grown men or women, as the case may be, getting angry and saying things about a college football player, like they say. I don't understand that. But I also think you have to step back and look at the picture. And I've talked to several people about some of the things that have happened. I think more than half of his interceptions, you could say, were not his fault. 2 of them bounced off receivers' hands and got intercepted. One was a messed up situation with trying to throw deep to a Cam Coleman who was out there in some pain. And one time he got his arm hit. And I've talked to several people in particular about the interception against Oklahoma. And it was a play, I guess you'd call it an option route. The receiver could go inside or he could go outside. So the quarterback has to see which way he's going to go. and he went inside, and it was a really good play call by either Venables or the defensive coordinator. The linebacker ran up and hit the guard, and then took off back into coverage, and Thorne just never saw him. He threw it where he was supposed to throw it, but he never saw it. So, he threw it where he was supposed to throw it based on what he saw, because he didn't see the linebacker, and so he got intercepted. And the thing that still puzzles me a little bit is nobody tackled him, that he was able to return it for a touchdown. But and as far as the play at Georgia, it was a completely messed up play. He didn't really change the play as much as he just moved Jarquez from the left to the right based on what he saw. And as Hugh said Monday, he didn't need to do that. But I'll be honest with you, the uproar over that play has kind of amazed me. I mean, it was a messed up play. There are messed up plays in every game. And I don't believe Auburn was going to win if they made that first down. And so, I mean, it's
like their own 35-yard line or something like that.
40, so like 42, I think. I could be wrong, but still, I don't believe that was that's but that kind of stuff needs to stop happening. And whether it's miscommunication with the coaches or whatever it is, that stuff needs to stop happening. But I see message board posts saying the quarterback won't let his he needs to stop letting his ego get in the way, and that's just not who Peyton Thorne is. Peyton Thorne wants to win, and is he going to be in New York for the Heisman unveiling? I doubt it. No, and I mean he is not a great quarterback. I do think he can be a good quarterback, but for every quarterback, a lot of that depends on what's going on around you. And I mean, Jason Campbell caught hell for 3 years. I mean, he really did. And then in his last year, he was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year, and he had some really good receivers, and he had two of the top 5 picks in the NFL draft at running back. So that makes you better if you're a quarterback. But I do think that Peyton has taken more criticism than he deserves, because it's easy to say, well, it doesn't matter what happened, it was an interception. Well, that's really not true. It does matter if you're just talking about how this person played. I mean, I saw one game a couple of years ago where Tom Brady threw like 5 or 6 interceptions. It happens. And but I do think he's Auburn's best option. I think, and Hank Brown's a terrific young man, and he may be a great quarterback. I'm not saying he won't be, but it seemed obvious against Arkansas that he wasn't at that point ready for that, relative to what he had faced the week before against New Mexico.
Yeah, and I think too, part of the Peyton Thorne discourse with Hugh Freeze was, and maybe we can talk about our next topic with this as well. Freeze is very transparent, and immediately, I mean, I'll admit, I asked the follow up to Freeze.
Nothing wrong with asking. No, there's wrong with that.
Right, and I asked Freeze. Well, some people have an issue with some of my questions, Phil. I asked the question in Sanford Stadium about, did he just call that play all by himself? And look, Freeze is transparent. We love it as reporters. But I think it has, in that situation, is sort of an example of, he could have, and I'm not saying he should have done this, but he could have just played it off. But instead it made for a situation where post game you had 2 different sides. You had Peyton Thorne saying one thing happened, you had Hugh Freeze saying the other thing happened, and that just sort of fed into it. But that's who Hugh Freeze is.
He
He
is,
is not going to pull punches after a game.
and I think really that he would be well served not to be quite so much that way, because there is a reason why coaches often say, "Well, I really don't know what happened. I'm going to have to watch the film." Because if you're the coach and you say what you think happened, and then the quarterback says what he thought happened, and they're not the same, that becomes a story. And when it doesn't have to be. And from what I've heard about that play, Peyton wasn't the only one that messed up. The offensive line was like blocking for one thing when they were supposed to be blocking for another thing. And it was just a botched play. But it comes across as Hugh throwing somebody under the bus, and I really don't think he ever intends it that way. In fact, I'm convinced he doesn't. But he's asked, and this is what he saw happen, and he answers the question. And but sometimes he meant to be praising Eli Drinkwitz Monday, and now he's caught some heat, not a lot, but some heat about that.
They'll talk about it on ESPN on Saturday. I can guarantee you.
And that's there's no doubt what he meant. He just thinks Eli's done it. Eli's his buddy, and he thinks he's done a great job. And but Eli also had 3 straight non-winning seasons before he got to the last season, and his administration stuck by him, and now they've won 16 out of the last 19. Now I don't know. I don't think they're going, regardless of what happens Saturday. I don't believe they're going to live up to the preseason hype that they had. I don't believe that. I haven't seen any sign of it really. It's. I think Texas A&M is a pretty good team, but you probably ought not to get beat 42-11 when you go to College Station.
Yeah.
And but they may win the rest of their games. But I do believe I appreciate his transparency. I think all of us do. But if I was his PR guy, which I wouldn't be good at being anybody's PR guy, but if I was his PR guy, I would say, wait until you see what happened. Wait until you watch the tape and see what happened. And then on Monday after that, then you can be transparent and say, here's what happened. That's what I would do. And, look, I don't know. There's been some things that have happened that are hard to explain. I mean, why didn't Peyton Thorne know that Cam Coleman was hurt? And why didn't and he said himself after the Georgia game at that place that I should have called timeout before that play. And he's right. He should have. But to then translate that into he's a bad coach, this is a poorly coached team, our coaches don't know what they're doing, et cetera, like fans do. That goes back to what we were talking about earlier. There's lots of mistakes made that fans and reporters don't really see. They don't know their mistakes. And it only takes one for a play to get blown up.
Yeah, I think we're talking about Peyton Thorne a few minutes ago. I think, there's criticism that falls on him. I think a lot of the time there should be equal criticism for Hugh Freeze. And I think the other way it goes around is what players have taught, and the players have said it themselves this year. There's a certain point where players have to execute too.
Yes.
A coach can't be out there on the field, but at the same time, a player can't be calling the play either. So I mean, it's a symbiotic relationship. The blame game needs to be shared a little bit with everybody.
Oh, I agree. And here's the thing. Okay, I don't think that. I think probably that Peyton should have not moved Jarquez to the right instead of the left. But I also think that it would have been entirely made sense to say, we're running to the left, and that's what we're doing. It's not a read play. Just give it to him. And I think it's going to be interesting to see. The other thing is about, Jarquez and need more touches, which he readily acknowledged on Monday. And but the question I have about that is he willing to do what I just said? Is he willing just to say, give it to him, as opposed to running RPO, which is the whole basis of his offense?
And I think that is such a big storyline exiting the bye week. And I think Freeze has kind of hinted at it. I can't remember his exact words on Monday, but I think he's sort of, because he is a scheme all the way, stay within these boundaries of what we're trying to do. When it works well, it's worked well. It has also, I think, been a reason why they have failed on offense the last couple years.
I wonder if maybe, and I think this is when you talk about quarterbacks in general, they like to throw it. And I'm not saying anybody has indicated this to me or anything. I don't know. But I just wonder if they want Peyton to be a little more willing to give it off, even in the RPO. A little more, get a little more R in the RPO.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know that. I just wonder. But I think they got enough to win games, but they don't have enough to win games if they make a bunch of mistakes, and certainly not if they turn the ball over a lot.
Yeah, I think a pretty easy self-scout for them this week. And just kind of based on what Freeze has said, I would be surprised if part of that evaluation from the first 6 games did not include more of what you were talking about of, more brute force play calling. Right. I would not be surprised if we see them try to get Cam Coleman in space and just get some easy throws to your Megatron looking freshman receiver. Stuff like that, I think, is probably part of their self-scouting.
I agree. The drive before the interception against Oklahoma, not the one that interception, the drive before, and Peyton threw a slant that almost got intercepted. And even my old eye saw that Cam Coleman was standing on the left hash mark going that way, uncovered. I mean, that if I was going to criticize Peyton for anything with my limited knowledge, it would be that kind of thing. If you see somebody wide open, throwing football, and make sure you see him too. So, because obviously he didn't see him, or I'm sure he would have thrown the football. But anyway, I'm no expert, but that's my opinion.
Phillip, I think if you want to, we can talk a little bit about basketball here toward the end of the show. SEC Media Day was this week in Birmingham, an event that I absolutely adore because it is everything that SEC Football Media Day should be. It is one day. It is bang, 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 back to back, get everything done, get all the interviews done. And also it's great just because there's just not as many people there. It's just kind of a quiet event. Really enjoyed it. I thought Auburn's time at the event this year was very insightful and knowledgeable from Bruce Pearl, Janai Broom, Denver Jones, as they preview what is a really highly anticipated season. Phillip, in the preseason SEC poll, Alabama's picked to win the league. They're picked number 1, I think, for the first time in a while. They're a preseason top 5 team. That didn't come as a huge surprise. Auburn is picked number 2 in the league for the first time since 1999 when they were coming off of that season. And they were picked to win the league in 1999. So it's the highest since then. Phillip, I mean, we've been, and maybe this isn't to the head, I think maybe Alabama making the Final Four was the state's basketball product coming to a head. But this is another example of what we've been talking about for years, and that is that Auburn and Alabama have, over the past 6 or 7 years, just meteorically improve the product of college basketball in this state.
You would have to have been around as long as I have to understand how remarkable that seems, that Auburn and Alabama are picked 1 and 2 in the SEC. How both of them had, Will went to a bunch of Sweet 16s, never went any further. Wimp Sanderson. Sonny went to 5 straight NCAA tournaments, got to the Sweet 16 twice, the Elite 8 once, and had Louisville, who won the national championships on the road. So they've been there before, but I remember in 1980, whatever year it was, 1980 something, when Auburn and Alabama played in the SEC tournament championship game. It was in Birmingham, but it was like, well, what a cute little story. Auburn and Alabama are playing in the SEC championship instead of Kentucky, Tennessee, etc. And I'm not sure, and neither one of them had been to the Final Four before Auburn went in 2019. Alabama went for the first time last season. And but now, I mean, they both of them, they won SEC championships. They've been to the Final Four. They've done all those things, and now they are viewed as obviously basketball powerhouses, better than all those other teams going into this season. That doesn't mean they will be better, but that's the way they're viewed. And I'm just not sure I ever saw it. I think it's awesome, to be honest with you. And I think this is going to sound funny, but I think Auburn deserves credit for it because, and this is not a slap at Alabama in any way. It really is. It is not a slap at Alabama. But the fact is, when Auburn gets to a level like that, and at the time Alabama just wasn't very good in 2019, they don't like that. So it was entirely predictable that they were going to try to hire the right coach and that they were going to make the commitment to put themselves in that position. And they've done that. Yeah. And so now, I mean, the interesting thing about Auburn to me is going to be that, I think I saw where Bruce said that we're going to lose some games. And they are. You don't play a schedule like that and not lose any games. In fact, you look at Alabama, they played a similar schedule to that last year and lost just about all of them. But that's still, having played those games, helped them get a good enough seed to give them a fighting chance to get to the Final Four. And I think the same will be true of Auburn. But the SEC is going to be brutal. I mean, it's really going to be brutal. I think in the 1980s, when Shaq was in the league and Chuck Person and Barkley and those kind of guys, the SEC was really, really good. But I think this year could be the best it's been.
Well, they've got
certainly possible.
It's crazy to think about. They've got 9 teams in the top 25 in the AP.
That's amazing. That's freaking amazing. Used to, if they got 3, that was awesome.
And think about it, Phil. One of those teams, take your pick of somebody in the top 25 because there's 9 of them. One of those teams is going to technically finish in the bottom half of the league.
Yeah.
And they'll probably be like a 6th seed in the tournament.
Yeah. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
This is and I did want to talk about that, what you said about Bruce's comments. This is going to be a Big 12 type season where I think Auburn fans, and I think we've been building toward this, so I trust all you Auburn fans to have learned by now. That sounded kind of condescending, not trying to be condescending. We've been building toward this, of Bruce building up this program to where they're getting to a season where they scheduled like they did in the non-con, and the SEC is so good. They are going to lose games. They're going to lose at least a handful of games. They are probably going to lose double a handful of games. I think at this point, Auburn fans understand. There was a time a few years ago when they'd start 3-2 in the SEC, And boy, it would be the grumbling would be kind of crazy. I think at this point, people have sort of realized to play it out a little bit, and certainly that's going to be the case this year. They got to go to Houston, they got to go to Duke, they got to play Purdue. Even just in the not, they got to go to Maui and play like 2 or 3 national contenders. Even by the time the SEC play starts, Auburn's going to have a few losses. And as Bruce Pearl said, one of the biggest, if not the biggest storyline the entire season is going to be, what does Auburn do in response? Do they get better? Do they play those teams and say, all right, we've played the best, here's what we've learned? Or do they get down on themselves and get beaten up by a really good league? It's going to be really, really interesting to watch.
It's going to be very interesting to watch. And I mean, they've had high expectations before since Bruce has been here, obviously. Yeah. I mean, but I'm not sure that they've been as high as they are this year. Because really, to me, Auburn's got everything. If you look at college basketball in recent years, older, experienced teams have done very well in the postseason. And when you combine older, experienced teams with a very talented team, then that's what you're looking for. And that's what Auburn's got this year. So now, does that mean they'll be better than Alabama or better than Kentucky or better than Tennessee or whoever? Not necessarily. It's like you said, there's 9 teams ranked in the top 25. So winning on the road is going to be exceptionally difficult for everybody.
Yeah. Just about every SEC game Auburn plays on the road, the other team will be thinking, got to beat these guys.
Yeah.
It will be their SEC road opener is at Texas. That is going to be a massive, Wednesday night game or something. Auburn now has it's been this way for the past few years. They've got the target on their back.
Yeah.
And when they go on the road, it is an event, and they're going to get everybody's best shot at it.
That's right. But that's why having the kind of experience they have is so important.
Yeah. And they played better on the road last year than they had.
And you can't, you're only as talented as you are. But when you're really talented and you've been around it and you've been through the SEC once or twice, then that's very valuable. And then you know what it's like to go to the NCAA tournament and lay a gigantic, huge, monstrous egg like they did last season, and because I do think this you're talking about fans understanding. I think and not just at Auburn, at most SEC schools, football has been the thing for a long time. And I think sometimes it has been difficult for people to understand the difference. That every loss feels like the end of the world in football. It shouldn't feel like the end of the world in basketball.
Yep. And I forget the KenPom projection, but they're projected number 3 team in the country by KenPom, and they're only projected to win like 24 regular season games. Like it's not like they're saying they're going to run the table in the SEC.
Somebody runs the table in the SEC. That'll be an extraordinarily impressive feat.
I think there's a decent chance this year that whoever wins the league or ties to win the league is going to be like 12-6. Usually you got to be 14-4, 13-5.
At best 11-5 or 13-5 probably.
Yeah. I think you could probably see, because just road games are going to be at a premium.
Last year, there was a big logjam near the top last season.
Yep. Everybody had a shot at it. 4 or 5 teams had a shot at it. So, it'll be really interesting. Janai Broome continues to be one of the most decorated players in program history. He'll get, whenever they roll it out, he'll get preseason All-American honors, of course.
Yeah.
I voted him personally. I had a vote this year in the All-SEC poll. I voted him preseason player of the year in the league. Ended up going to Mark Sears from Alabama. Not a huge surprise based on their Final Four run. I just think Broome is a more overall impactful player. That's my opinion.
I guess the last, Chris Porter was the first team All-American in 1999, as was Doc Robinson. and then they were both back in 2000, but then Chris got caught taking money from an agent, and which now wouldn't even matter. But
yeah, now that's called Wednesday.
Yeah, exactly. But and then so he got basically season ending. They didn't return, and and so then all of a sudden they weren't as good. But he's the last one I can remember that was close to as decorated as Janai Broome is, and that was a. And I think this is especially true in basketball. Being able to evaluate players at another school, at a smaller school, at Murray State, and say, this guy can play in the SEC. I think basketball coaches can see that easier than football coaches can see a quarterback playing in 1AA and saying he can play in the SEC. He might be able to, but he might not be able to. And Johnny Broome is he's a big time player, and I don't see. And again, my interaction with him is limited. I've talked to him a few times. I don't see him being the kind of guy that gets caught up in it all. I think he wants to win, and also, if he in fact has improved his 3-point shooting as much as I read, then I mean he might and has a great year. He might get himself into the first round of the NBA draft, or at least high in the second round.
Yeah.
But so it's important. That's important for all of them. I'm sure all of them think they can play in the NBA, and but it's different, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I look forward to it.
Yeah, and Broome said this week, he said it was kind of interesting, and you usually don't hear this kind of response talking about this upcoming season. He said, I've pretty much done the individual stuff, which is right. Okay, he pretty much has. Obviously, he's SEC Player of the Year, National Player of the Year, whatever. But he said now he's more focused on everybody else. So it's kind of what you were saying. I think he understood that if he came back, he was going to be the big bad in not only at Auburn but in the SEC period. I think he understands what he means to this team, and like you said, it's it's a credit to Bruce Pearl and this staff. That's been one of the better things they've done in their entire tenure. Is, I mean, how many transfer misses have they had? It's been extremely limited. They've turned a ton of transfer guys into, I mean, whether it's Samir Dowdy, Javon McCormick, and now all these guys nowadays, they have turned interesting transfer prospects into really good SEC players.
Yeah, and the other thing that Bruce has done that impresses me is he has turned them into really good SEC players who are willing to share, just to know they're not going to play 35 minutes a game. That there's other guys going to play too, as he did last year. And now whether it'll be to the extent this year it was last year, who knows? But I mean, but they got some young talent too. So I think that's but there are guys on this team like Denver Jones, for instance. He just kind of quietly goes about his business, but he is a really, really, really good player.
He's very good. He's really good.
And most of them really. And Chad Baker-Mazzara, he's a really, really good player as long as he keeps his head on his shoulders. Doesn't do something not very smart. But he's a really good player. I'm sure those two freshmen are really good players. And the kid from Georgia Tech, everything I've read that you write says he's the best shooter out there. The other players say he's the best shooter out there. So, and I think it's going to be they're going to be hard to deal with, but they're going to play a lot of teams that are also hard to deal with. So we'll see.
Yep. Should be interesting. Well, before basketball season gets started, Auburn still, of course, hitting the midway point. They're now heading into the second half of the season. Tip off at Toomers. If you listen to this on Thursday, tip off at Toomers is Thursday night. So we'll have some pictures and video from that at downtown Auburn. And so Auburn and Missouri get rolling. Auburn returns from its bye week this Saturday in Columbia. Phillip, if you don't have anything else to add, I think we may.
I think we're good.
All righty. Well, we appreciate everybody listening this week, and we'll catch y'all later.
All right.